pleasure to be joined by Freda and Hawk Koch. Freda Johnson, Hawk Koch, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to step away. Tell us about the incredible guests we've got lined up.
Sure. Hawk, I think you have a daunting task in front of you. I don't know how you're going to be able to get 50 years and all of those incredible and iconic movies crammed into an hour and a half. We might need to make this its own series. I read A Life in Movies, Stories from 50 Years in Hollywood by our guest Irwin Winkler, and it's a total page turner. Great stories, lessons about the process of movie making, and so much about relationships and what that means in Hollywood. And to that, I'd like to thank you for your enormous Rolodex. Does anybody even have that anymore? And the relationships that you have and have maintained that make this show possible. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Freda, and thank you, everybody. I'm happy to at least know that our residents and our Facebook friends are out there, and I know that the residents have gotten their second doses. So hopefully, everybody's going to feel a lot safer. I know we do for the staff and for the residents. I am happy to have today. I'm actually thrilled, because Irwin Winkler's career as a producer, director, and writer encompasses popular and influential movies that have impacted contemporary culture. With a passion for big, bold, meaningful stories, his films include an array of true screen classics, garnering among them 12 Academy Awards and 52 nominations. I was lucky enough to work for Irwin as a first AD on a film early in his career and early in my career called Up the Sandbox with Barbra Streisand. So we have known each other for over 50 years. And now I'd like to welcome Irwin. Irwin, are you there? Hello, Irwin. Is he there?
I'm here.
There he is. Good afternoon.
Hawk, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm good. I'm happy to see you, and I'm happy to be talking to you instead of listening to Trump's defense attorneys.
Me too, by the way.
Much more fun. So Irwin, as Freda said, you've got such a huge resume that we're not going to go through everything. But let's start with when you were a little kid growing up on Coney Island. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your family, and did you go to movies? I mean, what was life like other than going on the roller coasters?
Well, I worked on when I was, I guess about 16, one summer, I got my introduction into show business by working as I guess you would call me a separator. I worked in a bumper car amusement venue. And those of us who don't know what a bumper car is, it's when the electric cars bang together. Well, my job was separating all the bumper cars when they got stuck, which gave me a great background for Hollywood, by the way. When you're dealing with a couple of actors that really are bumping against each other, you got to know how to separate them. So I learned at an early age. And what happened is I read a lot when I was very young. Walter Raleigh, a lot of adventure stuff. And but other than going to the local movie theater, one in Coney Island there were basically a Lowe's movie theater and an RKO movie theater. And the Lowe's movie theater would play obviously all the great MGM movies. I remember seeing Gone with the Wind and An American in Paris and all those great early movies. And the RKO theater would play a lot of black and white, a lot of Warner Brothers stuff. So I got a good mix of films. And also, I didn't have a lot of money. So I would go, and if I would watch, I don't know, a Humphrey Bogart movie, I'd watch Casablanca 4 times I just stay there all day and I watch it over and over again. And after a while, I got a sense of how it was made just by looking at it and having the opportunity to see it several times within a limited period of time. So that was my kind of education. But beyond that, I had nothing much to do with films other than that.
Was there a movie you came home to your parents and said, wow, this really
Not
sparked
at,
you?
not at all. The only thing that I was in my neighborhood, there was a guy who was about 6'3". He wore a black suit with a white shirt and a black tie, and he was an agent at MCA in those days, which was the great theatrical agency. And I was very impressed by looking at this tall guy with this black suit and a fancy tie. And he impressed me, not the movies, but the guy impressed me. And turned out many, many years later, when I started making movie, and I was making my first directing assignment, which was Guilty by Suspicion, a movie about the blacklist. I wanted to get a film of Milton Berle, the old Milton Berle show, and I had a scene set up with Bob De Niro, who was the blacklisted film director, and his young son standing in front of the May Company on Wilshire Boulevard, looking at a television set in the window of the May Company, because they couldn't afford to have their own television set. And believe it or not, I had to go to that same guy that I grew up with, whose name I can't remember even, to get the rights, because he represented Milton Berle. So it went around a big circus.
And when you shot that, you had no idea in front of the May Company that when people come at the end of this year to the May Company, they'll be coming to the new Academy Museum of Motion Pictures.
Exactly.
So there you are. Now, your parents weren't in the business. Your father was
My father was sold wholesale silks and cottons and woolens, fabrics. And I graduated from Abraham Lincoln High School a year early. I skipped a term. And so I went I applied for NYU, and I got into NYU, but there was still a lot of students there that were from the GI Bill. So they were much older, and obviously men who had served in the war. So I was really out of place. I was a kid.
This was the Civil War, right?
The Second World War.
Oh, not the Civil War. Sorry.
No, it was it was the First World War that had morphed into the Second World War. And I joined the Army. Just to get out of school. I really didn't like it. I wasn't doing very well. And this was the Korean War now. I joined the Army during the Korean War. And I grew up in that 2-year period. And when I got out of the Army, I went back to NYU, but now I really cared. And I had a professor, his name was Leahy, not a very important guy on the faculty, but he introduced me to the American literature of mid 20th century, Faulkner, Steinbeck, Hemingway, and I really fell in love with reading through this one professor. And when I graduated from NYU, I went looking for a job, and I ended up in the famous William Morris mailroom.
I have one story that I love about a friend of mine who was in the CAA mailroom, who, when he first got there, every morning at 9 a.m., they had bagels and lox and cream cheese and everything out. And his job this one day was to put out the bagels and lox. And he actually put them in a pyramid and put the cream cheese in a nice dish with fork for the lox and everything. Nobody had ever done that before. And he was standing off to the side, and Fred Spector yelled, who did that? Who put that together like that? And my friend was scared out of his mind. And he kind of raised his hand meekly. He said, well, I did, Mr. Spector. He said, you're out of the mailroom and you're on my desk. And it was Paul Hook, who's now a major, below the line agent at ICM. But I just wondered, tell us a story or two of what was going on when you were in the mailroom.
My experience wasn't about cream cheese and lox. It was a little different. What happened was they had hired me as a temp in the mailroom only for the summer. I graduated to NYU in like the middle of June, and they said, okay, we'll put you on for 8 to 10 weeks. You'll fill in for all the people that are on holiday during the summer. So I didn't care. I was, just looking for a job. And, but I kind of liked it. And I made friends with some of the other guys in the mailroom. Jerry Weintraub was in the mailroom with me. George Shapiro was in the, Bernie Brillstein, a really friendly group of guys. And Bernie especially, we became he was really a terrific guy. Anyhow, and the head of the mailroom called me in and said, look, I just want you to know you're going to be leaving in a couple of weeks, so just prepare yourself. And as we told you, you're only here for the summer. And I said, fine, okay. And a couple of days later, he called me and he said, look, I have a contract that has to go up to be signed by Billy Eckstine. And Billy Eckstine was a very, very important singer at the point, and a great, great singer. He gave me $4 to take a cab from 55th Street in Manhattan up to 125th Street where Billy Eckstine lived. Well, I was making $40 a week, so I wasn't about to take a taxi. So I walked to the subway, and sure enough, there was an express train coming in, and and the next stop was 125th Street. I got out, went up to Billy Eckstine's apartment. He signed the contract. I got back down into the subway. An express came in. I was back at the Morris office in 15 minutes. And I brought the envelope into my boss, and he gave me a dirty look, and he said, boy, I'm sure you didn't take a taxi and you pocketed the $4, which he was right about. And he said, but you also must have signed Billy Eckstine's name. You counterfeited his name. There's no way you could have made the trip back and forth. I said, no, call up Mr. Eckstine. And sure enough, he called up Billy Eckstine, and Billy Eckstine said, no, the kid was up here, and I signed the contract. Well, Sid Feinberg, who was the head of the mailroom, was so embarrassed, he let me stay on. And that's how I continued my career at William Morris. Now, 30 years later, maybe 40 years later, 30 years later, a friend of mine, Jerry Perenchio, was having a birthday party. And and he hired Billy Eckstine to be the singing entertainment. And after he sang, Billy Eckstine, as fate would have it, he was sitting next to me for dinner afterwards. And I introduced myself and I told him this story. And he looked at me like I was a complete idiot. Why are you telling me this story? Which only means that sometimes the most important thing to you means nothing to the guy that's sitting at the other end of the table. So that was my experience at William Morris. But I wasn't a very good agent. I wasn't very happy there. I spent 6 or 7 years there. Margot and I got married when I was in the mailroom. And we started having children. And then I met Bob Chartoff, who gave me an opportunity to go into management business with him. And
well, let me ask you a question, Irwin. You say in your book, I found this really interesting, and I wondered was this Irwin Winkler from the time he was 10, or did something happen? And I'm quoting you, I don't know why I start every day by having to defeat the world. Is that something? And I wondered if you found the answer to why you feel that way, or at some point you felt that way.
I think I started feeling that way when I went into the management business with Bob Chartoff. When I was at the Morris office, I was kind of protected because the culture there at the time was if you just did your job, they would keep you for life. So you were kind of secure. They wanted to treat you like a family, and they did. But some of us, like me, didn't want to be treated like a son or part of a family. I wanted to be out on my own. So as long as I had that protection, I didn't have the enthusiasm or the drive that I had later on. When I went into business with Bob, we just started. We had no money. I had 2 kids. I had to make it. I didn't have any choice. I didn't have a check coming in every week. If we booked Jackie Mason in the mountains, in the Catskill Mountains, and we picked up $500 in commission, that would go right towards paying for the drugstore. So maybe that's what started. And once I got on that track, I kind of liked it. and I found that in order to really make movies back in that day, and I don't think it's any different now, you really got to work at it. It isn't, nobody gives you a free pass. I don't think out of all the movies I made, even, you know, the Rocky Fours and all that, every one of them was tough to get the money, to get it, put it together, to get the script. Well, you know, you do it. It's never easy. And I guess it's just been built in. And you know, 50 years later, I'm still finding it a battle every day to make a movie.
I think it's tougher today. Not that it wasn't tough before, but I think today is even tougher.
I don't think it was ever easy. Yes.
So you guys are managing, and all of a sudden you decide you guys are going to become producers. Can you tell us how that kind of happened from manager to producer?
Well, we didn't decide. Somebody decided for us. What happened was we were representing a guy in England who had the loan outs on Julie Christie. He gave Julie Christie a start, and he said to me, "Look, I've got these 6 options on Julie Christie. See if you could find a movie for her." And he was a small-time English producer that was starting to branch out and make interesting films. And he made Darling with Julie Christie. And we started negotiating directly with the president of MGM at the time, a lovely man by the name of Robert O'Brien. And Mr. O'Brien, after we were in a very involved negotiation and he liked what we said and what we did and how we handled ourselves, he said, you know, if you guys get a script, I'd really like to make you producers out in Hollywood. He said, I got a lot of old-fashioned guys out there, and I like your youth and your spunk and your, not balls, but he was intimating that. And get a script and I'll make you a producer. Well, we didn't have any scripts, but we got a call from the head of his story department in New York, a man by the name of Russ Thatcher. And Thatcher said, look, I've got this script here that I think would really be great for Julie Christie. And I'd like you to give it to Mr. O'Brien to read. And I said, why would you want? He said, I can't get him to read anything. He's got a pile of scripts on his desk and he never reads anything and we can't get anything done. That hasn't changed that much, I don't think. And he said, but he wants to be in business with you, so you give him our script. I said, really? He said, yeah. So he sent over the script. I read it. It wasn't very good, but what do we have to lose? So I called Mr. O'Brien. I said, Mr. Brown, we have a script here. We think if we can talk Julie Christie into doing it. Why don't you read it and let us know what you think? And sure enough, a couple of days later, he called and he said, you know, that script you sent me for Julie Christie, he said, I don't think I want to do it with Julie Christie. So I said, oh, that's too bad. He said, but I have another idea. I said, really? He said, yeah. What about doing it with Elvis Presley instead of Julie Christie? I said, in the script I gave you for Julie Christie, you now want to do it with Elvis Presley. He said, yeah, what do you think about that? I said, that's the best idea I ever heard. And he said, how quickly can you get out to Hollywood? And there we were.
And you had
that was the easiest deal we ever made, by the way.
Yeah, right. And
and he had, before we went out to Hollywood, he had the head of production, who was a very, very nice man by the name of Robert Whiteman. Bob Whiteman was in New York, and they arranged for Bob Chartoff and I to meet with Mr. Whiteman before we went out to LA, before I went out to LA. And when we sat down, he said, now, which one of you two guys is going to be the director and which one is going to be the producer? We didn't know anything about producing and even less about directing, but we were smart enough to say, no, we're going to be the producers. And that was it.
Right. And so when you and Bob got together, you had been working as managers, now as producers, and you learned what producers did. Tell me a little bit about the relationship between you and Bob, and who did what, and how did you divvy up the work, and how did you make decisions on let's go for this or let's not go for that?
Well, we had a really, really collaborative relationship. By that I mean, none of us would ever say, if one of us liked the script and wanted to make a movie, the other person wouldn't say, no, I don't want to make that one. So we always gave room to the other person. But but we were both doing pretty much the same thing, except at one point, Bob went off to Europe to make Leo the Last, and he stayed in Europe for a couple of years. So I stayed in LA making the films while he went off there. And we communicated basically by telephone. There was no email, obviously.
Both were people who were on the set, or you were on the set a couple of times and then you were kind of packaging the next one and looking.
No, we grew up, and you probably know because we did a movie. I mean, I was on the set every day.
Some of the answers. I was just loving.
Yeah.
I'd love them to hear.
We were in those days a producer. First of all, there was only one producer or a team: Bob Charter and Irwin Winkler, Hawk Koch, Irwin Winkler. Actually, Howard Koch Sr., your dad, who was a good friend of mine, a great man. What happened is you were on the set from morning to night, and then you were right with the film all the way. So what happened is if we were making a picture in Europe, Bob went off to Europe. He had a lot more freedom than I did as far as family is concerned. And I would stay on the set and be on. I didn't know any other way to make a movie than be on the set every day. And but I learned when I made our first movie, which was Double Trouble,
with Elvis
at MGM. It was with the old MGM, on the old MGM lot in Culver City. And I just kept my eyes open, kept my mouth shut, and I learned. So by the time we made Point Blank, we were really knew how to make a movie. And I don't know, 4 years later after we started, Bob Charter and I were sitting at the Cannes Film Festival with 3 films. They Shoot Horses was the closing night presentation. The Strawberry Statement won the Jurors Award, and Leo the Last won Best Director. So within 4 years, we had 3 films at Cannes.
So you had taste, and after that you
a lot of luck.
A
lot of luck. We had a lot of luck.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll talk about luck and I'll talk about diversity because this is luck. After we made Point Blank, we developed another script called The Split, based on the same original material, the same author, and we were looking to put it together. I was in touch with the William Morris agency with an agent by the name of Phil Kellogg, and he was representing Steve McQueen. He and another agent there called Stan Kamen were representing. You're smiling because you and I both remember those great names. And Kellogg gave the script that we had to split to Steve McQueen, and he said, "Okay, Steve likes the script and he wants to do it." Now Bob and I, there was such infighting at MGM between the LA office and the New York office that if the LA office recommended something to the New York office, they would kill it before it would go to Mr. O'Brien. So what we would do is fly to New York and see Mr. O'Brien ourselves and get an answer right there. So we had Steve McQueen, and Bob and I said, "Okay, we'll get on a plane, fly to New York, and see O'Brien and get this made." And as I'm leaving for the plane, I get a call from Phil Gersh, now very big agency, the Gersh agency, but Phil was the founder.
Irwin, this is Phil. This is Phil Gersh, Irwin.
Yeah, you do a good Phil, but a wonderful man and really represented everybody. I think he represented more cameramen and more editors and more art directors than anybody else in the business. But he called me up and he said, "You know, that script you have, I gave it to one of my clients and he wants to do it." I said, "Who is that?" He said, "Jim Brown." I said, "Jim Brown, the football player, Cleveland." Yeah. He said, "You know, he's done a couple of films for MGM." I said, "Well, I saw one of them." "Yeah, he's okay, but we're doing the movie with Steve McQueen." He said, "Oh, too bad." Bob and I get on the plane. We get into New York. We go to Mr. O'Brien's office. We get there, and his secretary says, "Mr. O'Brien is in a meeting. He'll be out in a few minutes. Have a seat." And we sit down, and a couple of minutes later, Mr. O'Brien's office, and who comes out of Mr. O'Brien? Phil Kellogg. And he said, hey, Irwin, what are you guys doing here? I said, Phil, we came to talk about Steve McQueen for The Split. He said, I should have called you. He decided that he was going to do another movie instead. The movie was
Bullet.
Bullet. That's right.
Bullet.
He's going to do Bullet instead. With that, the secretary says, Mr. O'Brien is waiting for you. So we go into Mr. O'Brien, and he said, what can I do for you guys today? And we said, we got this really interesting script. It's called The Split. And he said, well, who are going to star in it? And we waited a second, and we said, Jim Brown. He said, Jim Brown, I really like Jim Brown. He's very good. Yeah, well, how much is it going to cost? And we made a deal with Jim Brown. Now that's diversity in its purest form.
So let me ask you a question, because I would have loved to have been in that room. Did you and Bob kind of look at each other and understand, because you guys were partners, one of you was going to say Jim Brown and knew and had to keep a straight face?
Well, I guess we did. I don't remember our facial expression, but we were more surprised but we had, look, when we had Point Blank, we had the script of Point Blank. We thought that Lee Marvin would be great for Point Blank. So he had an agent by the name of Maya Mishkin. We called Maya Mishkin, and he wouldn't return my phone calls. We had just done one Elvis Presley, but we didn't know anybody. He never even returned my phone call. So we had a relationship with John Borman back in London, and Lee Marvin was in London making what was it? What's that?
30 dozen.
You should be on this side and I should be on your side. So we called up John Borman and we said, John, we've got this script and we think it's kind of good. And if you could find Lee Marvin and get a meeting with Lee Marvin and get him to read the script, and if he likes the script, he'll want you to direct it, we can make the deal. So he said, that's a big, I said, well, what do we got to lose? And sure enough, somehow, which I never found out how, John got to see Lee Marvin. He got Lee Marvin to read the script. Turned out Lee Marvin didn't like the script, but liked John Borman. And he said, I'll do it. And sure enough, Maya Mishkin called and said, oh, Lee Marvin wants to do your movie. So now Bob Charnoff and I flew to New York to see Mr. O'Brien. And Mr. Whiteman was in New York and came into the meeting. And we told him the story, and O'Brien said, "Oh yeah, I'll do it with Lee Marvin, but who you get to direct it?" And we figured, okay, this is the moment of truth. Why would they okay John Borman, who had just done a couple of documentaries for the BBC and some little Dave Clark movie? And sure enough, just when we had that moment of truth came, Mr. O'Brien's phone rang, and it was Stanley Kubrick, who was making 2001 for him, was on the phone. And he had this long conversation with Stanley Kubrick, and he hung up and he said, now, what were we talking about? I said, the budget. He said, yeah, what is it going to cost? I said, $1.6 million, whatever it was. He said, okay, go make the movie. And that's how John Borman got okay for his first movie. So
I was a roadie.
Hawk is, so much of it is just stupid luck.
Yeah. I was a roadie for the Dave Clark 5 just before John Borman.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I knew Borman because of that. So
yeah.
There's a lot of synchronicity.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we can't talk about all your movies because, as Freda said, we'd be here probably till the end of the weekend. So let's start with one that maybe all of us have seen several times. And I know for me personally, I was lucky enough to go to whether it was a premiere or the Directors Guild screening, the first moment that any of us in the Directors Guild theater saw Rocky. And at the end, as the many times that I saw it in the theater, it wasn't just me, but everybody in the theater at the end stood up and applauded. And there aren't many movies that I can think of where that's ever happened. So tell us from the beginning, and don't forget, Gene Kirkwood was my partner years later. So you got to make sure that some of the facts are there.
Well, what
How
happened
did it all
was
start?
it all started with Gene. Absolutely. Gene Kirkwood worked with Bob and I kind of as a freelance um, producer, whatever we didn't pay him very much, and whatever he brought in, he could be involved with. And what happened is Gene said, you got to meet this guy, Sylvester Stallone. He's a really good actor. He's really special. And we said, Gene, we're not casting anything. Why would we want to meet? And, Gene, well, he could bother you so much that he says, okay, Gene, bring him in. And sure enough, he brought in Stallone. And it was one of those meetings where you keep looking at your watch for, well, how do I cut this short and get out of here? And he, we didn't have anything. We were casting and all that. And sure enough, at some point, he was leaving and he said, I'm also a writer. And we said, really? Yeah. He said, if I send you a script, would you read it? And we said, sure. And he sent us the script. It wasn't Rocky, obviously. We read it and we thought the writing was really, really good, but it wasn't something we were interested in. So we called him and said, hey, look, we think you're a really good writer, but it's not something we're interested in doing. So he said, I got an idea. Can I come in and pitch my idea to you? So we said, sure, come on in. He came into the office and he pitched us the idea of Rocky. And he said, look, I'll write it for you. But you don't have to pay me any money for the script. And he didn't have any money. He was completely tapped out. He said, but there's only, if you like the script, I've got a star in it. So we figured, well, what do we got to lose? If we don't like the script, it didn't cost us anything. And if we like it, who knows? So he went off, he wrote about 40 pages, sent it in, and we liked what we saw. We gave him some notes. And sure enough, within a very short time, we had the script. And we said, it's not a bad movie. And we were under contract to UA at the time. We had a very strange deal. UA wanted to be in business with us. So we made a deal whereby if we don't do a movie for the first 9 months of our contract with UA, we can put a movie to them, which means that we can, if we have a script, as long as it's not an X-rated script and it's within a budget of $1.5 million, they have to make the movie. It's a put picture. So they turned the script down. We said, okay, it's a put picture at $1.5 million, and they did a budget, and the budget was $2 million on their budget. And they said, well, it's no longer a put picture. So we were kind of upset, and we said, you know what? And Gene was really great, and he would say, we got to make this movie. You got to make this movie. So we said, you know what? We said it to Mike Metaboy, who was the head of production, that we'll make the picture for $1 million, and Bob and I will put up anything over that. We'll guarantee completion. So Mike said, if you do that, we'll make the movie. And I said, okay, call Arthur Krim, who was his boss in New York. And Arthur Krim said, we don't want to make that movie. And I said, well, Mike said, okay. And he said, well, if Mike said, okay, we'll make the movie. And then they went to Sly, who didn't have a penny in the world, and offered him $250,000 for the script, that they wanted to make it with either Burt Reynolds or Ryan O'Neal. And Sly, to his credit, said, you know what? Irwin and Bob promised me that they would make the movie with me, and I'm not going to take you $250,000. We're going to make the movie. And that's how it got made.
There were rumors in those years that it went to some of the other studios, that Frank Price turned it down. Is that true? Did you go anywhere else?
No, nobody else saw it. It was all within UA. Sly didn't even have, I think Sly was, actually, I think it was represented by Fred Spector part of that time. In that period. So if somebody said it to Frank Price, I might have been, but I didn't know anything about it. No.
Right. Huh.
And by the way, we thought it was a nice little movie. We didn't think it was any great. Part of the reason we wanted to make it so badly was going back to what you spoke about 20 minutes ago, about defeating the world every day. One of the primary reasons we wanted to make that movie is because they wouldn't make it and they were contracting. They were obligated to make it as a put picture, and they made a phony budget so that we were not qualified under the deal. And when they did that, we were determined to make the movie more so. And even if we didn't even care about whether the script was good or bad, that was our determination. We're going to make that movie.
Right. And talk about, now I understand the ending. You played with the ending quite a bit.
Yeah, what happened is we finished the movie, and we had, during the last fight, people were standing and cheering and all that. And we finished the movie, and as at the ending of the movie was Talia Shire and Sly walk out of the arena. There's kind of dust and little newspapers on the floor, and it really is very mid-70s, very down, because he lost the fight. And we all said, something is not working here. We've got the audience all the way up here, and now they're kind of losing them. So we all got together and got Sly to rewrite the ending so that Talia comes into the ring, and although he lost the fight, he got the girl.
He stayed up.
So that became the ending. And to do that, UA wouldn't give us the money to do that. So they said, you guys are on for completion. You want to spend the money? Go ahead. So we did. So, but we wanted to be very careful about how much we spent. Obviously, it was coming out of our own pocket. So we hired like 20 extras and said, bring your hats and coats. So what we did is we put 10 extras in the back. We put Talia with them coming in. And okay, the next cut, we said, okay, you take off you were a first AD, probably one of the best. And you take off your coats, put your tie on, you stand in the front, you stand on the side. So we used the same extras for every cut as we went forward. And she came in the ring and they embraced, we cut, and he won. He got the girl, even though he lost the fight.
Right. Well, fabulous ending. And yes, I learned a lot from my dad because in the 1950s, he was making B movies. He made a movie called Desert Sands in Yuma, Arizona. And they had enough money for one day, 25 horses and 25 men. And they were all in Arab costumes with sitars on top of a hill. And they said, the director yelled action, and the 25 went down the hill waving the sitars. Director said, cut, said, take them off. They took off the Arab costumes, and underneath were French Foreign Legion. The wardrobe guy gave them a hat. They went up onto the other hill, and they had guns, and they said action. They went down the other way, and then they cut in for close-ups. So yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'll bet a lot of the residents remember those days.
Probably do. Probably
Great
do.
story. Now, from what I understand, and tell me if I'm wrong, it wasn't like UA wanted to really still believed in this movie, and you had a hard time getting distribution and getting it into theaters. Is that true?
Well, two things happened. We took the film to New York and showed it to the New York executives, and Margot was sitting next to Arthur Krem, and he fell asleep during the screening.
Right.
But at that screening, we invited. They told us we can't get any screens for Academy, for end of year. Everything is booked, and they said we can't get any theaters. So we invited a guy by the name of Bernie Meyerson, who is the buyer for the Lowe's Theater chain, and a man from an independent film theater owner in New York, to come to that same screening that Arthur Krim fell asleep at. And sure enough, at the end of the screening, Meyerson said that he would give us the Lower State 2. King Kong was playing in Lower State 1. And we got the Cinema 3 on 3rd Avenue. When we confronted the UA executives about it, they said, you have no theaters, that we can't play it. We had them call these two guys, and we got the theaters locked up that way.
Well, that was pretty cool. just so you know, I just got a message from somebody who's watching on Facebook, said, from Paula on Facebook, it's because of men like Irwin Winkler that I'm in this business and love what I do. Thank you, Irwin.
Very nice.
Don't know who Paula is. Could be the casting director, Paula Harold. I don't know.
Could be Paula Wagner.
Could be. I doubt that one, but maybe. But maybe. Okay, so Rocky is a big hit.
By the way, not a big hit, right? You know, what happened was we're playing at Cinema 3 and we open on a Sunday. In those days, you didn't open on a Friday, you open on a Sunday. Why, I don't know. We open on a Sunday in the Cinema 3 and the Lowe's. So Sly and I are there at the opening first shows and we're selling out, but it's like 133 seats in the place. So it's not a big deal, but we are selling out. And Sly leaves, I stay around, and about 10 o'clock, the New York Times comes out with the worst review you've ever seen. Vincent Canby is reviewing the movie saying, stay away, this Sly is a bum, the movie's terrible.
Right.
And I'm standing in front of the theater reading this New York Times, and I figure every critic in the country is going to read this review and they're going to write a bad review. So at that, Peter Falk, the actor, comes out. I knew him a bit, and he comes out of the theater and he says, congratulations. I said, look at this New York Times review. It's terrible. He said, listen, Putz, go into the theater. He said, the people are standing and cheering. Don't worry about this review. And that was how we started. And we were playing in one theater in LA, two theaters in New York. The next week, we added a theater in San Francisco and one in Philadelphia and one in Toronto. And if a theater was doing $3,500 on a weekend, the first weekend, the second weekend it would do $6,000. And the third week it would do $15,000. And so the film just ran and ran and ran and just became such a popular success.
It was either at the Bruin or the Village. I can't remember which.
No, it was at there was another theater. I don't remember the name. It was on a side street.
The National.
No, it wasn't the National. Those were the big theaters. Remember, there was a small theater, the Plaza. I think it was the Plaza.
Or the Regent or something.
Yeah, there was a theater called the Plaza which was a small standalone theater, which we also ran Raging Bull and True Confession, a whole bunch of movies that we opened in that theater.
Yeah, well, pretty exciting. And then all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but people start talking about the Oscars. And
well, but we didn't have in those days, Hawk, as you probably remember, there wasn't this big advertising,
yes,
big deal about the Oscars like we have today. I think that came along, a decade later. But yes, we won the Golden Globes as Best Picture, and there we were. The competition.
When you opened the movie and you loved it, and people were, cheering and everything, did you ever think of awards, or just that it was going to make a lot of money and it was going to be very successful?
Frankly, the fact that it was going to make a lot of money was very appealing at the time, so what I was following really every day, and Margot used to see me in the morning. I used to get the grosses overnight from every theater, every key city, to see how the picture was doing. But that was kind of fun to see it all happen. But no, we didn't think about it. There was no such thing as a big Oscar campaign or anything else. And look, the competition was so great. The other four pictures that were nominated for Best Picture were All the President's Men, a great classic that Alan Pakula directed. Taxi Driver, Marty Scorsese's brilliant movie. What else was out there?
Doesn't matter. That already, those are two pretty good.
No, there was. Anyhow, there was.
It wasn't the Goodbye Girl, was it?
No. It was,
Dreyfus was later. I think Dreyfus was Raging Bull.
Could that be? I don't know. But Raging Bull, we lost to Ordinary People. That was our big competition.
Right.
But Raging Bull got made because of Rocky. What happened is UA absolutely didn't want to make Raging Bull. As a matter of fact, the head of production, David Field, in a meeting that we had with Bob De Niro, Marty Scorsese, and I, he came up and he said, he said, why, to Bob De Niro, why would you want to make a movie about a cockroach? I thought De Niro was going to throw him out of the window at that point.
I had heard that term before because I knew Rocky Graziano, who hated Nick Lamotta, hated him. By the way, the other two movies were Bound for Glory and Network.
That's right. Yeah, there you go.
It's not that I knew that. Beecher kind of pushed in and gave me a
good.
No.
So anyhow,
Raging Bull.
But UA wanted to make Rocky 2 desperately, and we said the only way we'd make Rocky 2 is if they agreed to make Raging Bull.
Right.
And they said okay. So that's how Raging Bull got made.
Wow. By the way, I have to interrupt you again just because you probably don't know this, but Bernie Brillstein was a huge supporter of the Motion Picture and Television Fund, and Bernie's nephew, Rick, is actually living at the home. So Rick, we hope you're watching, and we hope you heard what Irwin said about your uncle. Sorry, let's go back to Raging Bull.
So what happened was
Bernie Meyerson, not Bernie Brillstein, Bernie Meyerson. Sorry.
Yeah, well, he's the guy that gave us the theater in New York.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Okay.
At the
Sorry,
Lowe's.
I screwed up. So Raging Bull is about Jake LaMotta, who, according to Rocky Graziano, he hated he thought he was dirty and blah blah blah.
Well, a lot of people felt that. I don't think he was ever accused of being a dirty fighter. He was a tough fighter, but he was a guy who was very compromised morally, you might say. But look, between Marty and Bob, they made a man who you understood.
Yeah.
You may not like what he was and who he was, but you certainly understood him. And I think Bob's performance is one of the great performances of that whole era, of any era.
Yes. You constantly mention, and I applaud you for this, Margot did this and Margot did that, and you had your kids. Your family means so much to you, Irwin, and I know that for over the years. But it sounds to me when in reading your book that Margot always came on location with you, or she was with you constantly and still is. And I think that a lot of people talk about the business and how tough it is to go away on location by yourself. And some of us have gotten in trouble over the years that way. But do you agree that in order for a marriage to stay together, you really got to stay together as much as possible?
Yeah, I think that's always been the case. Look, as you know, we went off to Africa together, and Margot was with me the whole time.
Yes.
Actually, the kids were there too.
Yeah.
We brought out 3 kids.
They were enjoying the Mount Kenya Safari Club. Yes.
Yes, that's right. We spent the Passover there. But no, what we've always done, actually early on, when the kids were very small, I remember back, maybe it was 71, I did a picture called The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight. And for some reason, Margot didn't come with me, but I would fly back to New York every Friday, from New York to LA every Friday, and Sunday night go back to New York. But there's an interesting story in that. It was The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, a script written by Waldo Saul. Really, really one of the really great writers.
Great writers.
He won an Academy Award for Midnight Cowboy. And Waldo told me his secret of writing. He came out of Stanford in 1940 and got a job as a writer in the MGM studio days when they had big story departments and a lot of writers on the contract. And I said, what's your secret? He said, the secret is, as a writer, what I would do, I knew that the studio would always find something to criticize in my script. So what I would do is I would finish my script. I would take out 3 or 4 pages in the first act, take out 2 or 3 pages in the last act and turn it in. I would kind of smooth it out. I turned it, and sure enough, the studio would say, wait a minute, there's something wrong in the first act, there's something wrong in and I had the pages in my drawer. So he said that was my secret. But what happened was, every Friday when I'd fly to LA from New York, Waldo would volunteer to drive me to the airport. And I would say, Waldo, you don't have to. The Teamster will take me. He said, no, I'll drive you. So every Friday he would drive me to the airport. And one day I got on a plane and his daughter, Jennifer Saul, was on the plane with me. And we're chatting. I said, your father's a terrific guy. He drives me to the airport every Friday. She said, you know why he does that? I said, yeah, he's just a nice guy. No, she said, he is a nice guy, but that's not why he does it. He's a writer. By driving the producer to the airport, he can take a day off from writing. You don't have to write that day.
Oh, God. Jesus. Hey, listen, our CEO from the Motion Picture Home, Bob Beecher, asked if he could just jump in real quick and give a hello before he's got to run to something. Bob, are you there?
Working on it. Just one more second.
Okay. You know Bob, don't you, Irwin?
I don't know if we met.
There he is, Bob. Irwin Winkler, Bob Beecher.
Yes, Irwin, you're amazing.
Hi, Bob.
Hiya. Just wanted to tell you how appreciative we are of you doing this with Hawk, how appreciative we are of your support over the years, and enjoying this amazing interview with Hawk, and just, love that you have been, a backer of the home and the fund throughout your career. It means a lot to us, and hopefully it does to you as well.
Well, thank you. The first time I came to visit the home, I saw the great Stanley Kramer in bed there. And I said to myself, this is someplace I want to support. It's been that was my first impression of the home, how this great man who needed to be taken care of was taken care of by his own.
Yeah. And we've been doing it, Irwin, I don't know whether you know, this year is our 100th year.
Really?
This is our 100th anniversary. So we have been supporting people like Stanley, above the line, below the line, agents, studio execs, whatever part of the industry you've worked in for 100 years now, and taking care of our own thanks to people like you and Marco. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's enough of you, Bob. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption.
All right. So I want to talk about now a book that I read that I loved and was a history major and loved. For some reason, I woke up in the middle of the night in 1957 and turned on the radio, and I heard that the Russians had put up something called Sputnik. And I got very, very interested in outer space and everything. And you guys made a movie that I absolutely loved, The Right Stuff. And you kind of talk about a little bit about how that came to be, and how originally it didn't have the early stuff in it.
Yeah.
Sam
What
Shepard
happened,
stuff, I guess.
I had a very, very early, one of the first people I met when I left the Morris office and I was out on my own was Tom Wolfe. And we became very friendly over the years. And his agent gave me an early copy of The Right Stuff, of the book. And Bob and I Bob was looking at buy a house up in Lake Tahoe. And we were driving up, and in those days, we never were out of touch with our office, and there were no cell phones or anything. So we stop off at a gas station every hour or so, every half hour, and call the office and say, anybody looking? Yeah, the agent for Tom Wolfe called and said, if you want to buy the book, you better move fast, because we have an offer from Universal. They're going to buy it for John Belushi, the right stuff for John Belushi. So Bob and I just made an offer and bought it right there. And we then hired Bill Goldman, who was probably the most important writer in Hollywood at the time, and maybe for a long time since, and maybe forever.
I did Marathon Man with him. Yeah.
Yeah. And we paid him at those days $1 million to write a script based on Tom's book, which was like spending $10 million today. And he wrote a script, turned it in. UA loved the script and said, okay, we'll make the movie. We said, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. The man that has the right stuff is the test pilot by the name of Chuck Yeager, and he's not in the movie. You only have the astronauts and nothing about Chuck Yeager, who, by the way, passed away about a month ago at the age of 96. Wow. So Bill Goldman says, wait a minute, my job is to get you a green light. I said, well, maybe that's your job, but our job is to make a movie that we're proud of. I also owe it to Tom Wolfe to really be truthful in translating his great, great book into the screen. So we had a big fight. Goldman walked off the script, and UA was not happy with us because we wouldn't make the movie.
Was this was still Medavoy and Krim and
no,
they
were gone. This was David Field and Steve Bach, the same guys that called De Niro, Jake LaMotta, a cockroach.
Right.
We then went out and tried to get financing for what our version was. And we found, but while we were doing this, we met Phil Kaufman. We liked him a lot. And we talked, and we hired him basically as a director. And he was going to, we met with him and Bill Goldman to see if we can convince Bill Goldman to change the script to include Chuck Yeager. Goldman didn't want to do it, and Phil was not happy. We finally said to Phil, why don't you write it? And he reluctantly agreed to write it. And we ended up with that script. And Alan Ladd, who had left 20th Century Fox after Star Wars and had a deal at Warner Brothers with his own company, he agreed to finance the movie. And so we moved it over there, and we then started casting it. And we found that, we didn't agree with everything about the casting. I, for instance, didn't want Sam Shepard. Phil insisted on Sam Shepard. I thought maybe we could get somebody like Bob Redford, but Phil was right and held out for Sam Shepard, and we hired him. And then a cast of unknowns, basically. And we spent all the...
They all became known after that movie.
Yeah. And we really invented a lot of the special effects back in those days. And the film got 8 nominations and won 4. But I had when we then had great publicity, we had a great flyover in Washington. We were on the cover of Newsweek when those things really mattered. We got 10 pages in Time magazine. And when the film opened, it was opening at the Chinese in Hollywood, and there was a standalone theater in Century City. I got dressed that Friday morning, took a shower, got into my car, drove to Hollywood to watch the crowd outside the theater. And when I got there was nobody there. And I said, well, I knew basically I was in trouble right then, but I said to myself, you know what? There was such a big crowd that the theater manager let everybody in early. But of course, when I walked into the theater, there was nobody there. So I then drove to Century City, and sure enough, there was nobody there at all. I was really quite despondent that night. My son Adam, who was going to Beverly Hills High, said, "Dad, you know, a funny thing happened with your movie." I said, "What is that?" He said, "Well, my teacher arranged, because Beverly Hills High is right next to Century City, for the class tomorrow. If anybody signs up, they can go to see your movie instead of coming into school in the afternoon." I said, "Well, that's great." He said, "Yeah, but it's very strange. Nobody signed up." I said, "You mean to say they'd rather sit in the classroom than go see my movie?" He said, "Yeah, I guess so." Well, that's when I knew we were in trouble. So we never could get an audience for the movie, ever. Never got an audience for the movie. And it is one of the movies I'm most proud of.
Right. Well, now, other than the ones you're most proud of, I heard of that you actually got the Stinker Award for a movie.
I think it was the Razzmat, it was a Razzle.
Oh,
Was it the,
it's called the Stinker Award, at least in your book. It's called the Stinker.
well, I probably got a couple of bad ones like that
Hey,
on
we
Revolution.
all have.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Like everything else, I kind of was very interested in the American history, and we were up in Aspen, and I went to the Aspen Library and got a whole bunch of books about the American Revolution. Had a script written on the movie that ended up being called Revolution. And I should have known better the moment I realized that we were doing a film about the American Revolution, which was going to be financed by a British company called Goldcrest. It was going to be directed by a British director. It was going to be shot in England, and they lost the war. I should have known right then I was in trouble. And we were. We got stuck in the mud in the English countryside, and I mean literally stuck in the mud. It rained the whole time. We had really great costumes. We had great cannons, but we had ultimately the script didn't work. Whatever changes that were made along the way took away whatever we were enthusiastic about. Margot and I lived in London through the whole editing process. And Hawk, it rained every day. I don't think I saw sunshine in 6 months in England. It was probably the worst experience I ever had. And the movie didn't work, never worked. To his credit, Al Pacino has spent many years in his own money trying to recut the movie, which I give him great credit for, and it just never happened. So that was a tough one. But you know what? I came back to London back in 2003 to make another movie called The Lovely, and it was the best experience I ever had. My son Charles was one of the producers. His wife was one of the leads in the movie, in The Lovely. Margot had her grandkids that she would put in a carriage and walk through Hyde Park. I had a great time shooting in London. I loved the movie. I loved Kevin Kline. I loved the Cole Porter music. And so one experience in London was terrible. The next one couldn't have been better.
So now you and Bob produce many movies together. And then at a certain point, you guys decided to go separate ways, and you become a director and a writer-director, actually. How did that decision come across? I guess first with how you and Bob decided to go separate ways, and then how you decided to become a director.
Well, Bob at some point in probably right about the time of The Right Stuff, the early 80s, Bob wanted to spend more time in charity and doing other things. And he had taken a trip to India where somebody tried to sell him their child, their son, literally wanted to sell their son into slavery. And Bob was very moved by it all and started a home for orphan orphan children in India, in a small community in India, and spent quite a bit of his time. And that's what he wanted to do. He didn't really want to bother that. And he didn't make many movies after that. I still loved making movies. And so I continued on. And the only thing we made together after that was the Rockies, right through Creed. And so what happened was we had gone to Israel to look for locations on a movie we were making with Scorsese called The Last Temptation of Christ. Turned out that we didn't actually produce the movie because it was right about the time of the Right Stuff. And in those days, we said, look, we just can't make the two movies at the same time. That would never happen today. But that's the way it was in those days. We couldn't be in the Negev desert and California at the same time. So we reluctantly, ultimately told Marty that we couldn't do the movie, and he made it on his own years later. Anyhow, coming back from location, we stopped off in Paris, coming back from Israel, and we had lunch with a British director by the name of Bertrand Tavernier. And at the end of the luncheon, Bertrand said to Marty and I, "Were you guys ever happy with the ending of New York, New York?" And we said, "No, we shot the ending about 4 or 5 times. We never could figure out what to do with it." And he said, "You know, that character that De Niro played, the Jimmy Doyle character, he would probably end up with an expatriate jazz musician in Paris." And I got on the plane back to New York from Paris, and I thought to myself, that makes a movie. And I called Bertrand. I said, "Let's do that movie." And we did it. It was called Round Midnight. We hired to play a nightclub owner, an American expatriate director that was blacklisted and moved to Paris. And he started telling me the stories about the blacklist. And I got intrigued. I didn't know very much about the blacklist. I got intrigued by it. We hired Abe Polanski, who was a blacklisted director, to write a script. Frankly, Bertrand and I both didn't like the script. I had my own ideas about it, and Bertrand kind of encouraged me. He said, "Why don't you write it?" Well, I ended up throwing out that script, wrote it myself, wrote a new script, and then I gave it to Scorsese to read, and he liked it a lot, and he said, "You should direct it." So that's what motivated me to direct it. The process of going from writing the script to actually getting it made, I detailed in my book on a diary basis. I kept a diary entry, and any person that wants to become a film producer or director should read those diary entries. What you actually have to go through to get a picture made, to get it cast, to get it financing. It's well, I finally got it. Marty recommended that Bob De Niro read it. Bob liked it, and he had a great deal of faith in me. He said he'll do it. And Warner Brothers said they would finance the movie, and I was off and running.
And now you've directed several films.
Yeah, I did 6 more after that.
That's 7 movies.
Huh?
7 movies.
Yeah, and then what happened was I felt that things were changing in the exhibition business and the distribution business, and I was in London. I went to visit Marty Scorsese, who was shooting Hugo, and we kind of talked, and I said, "Whatever happened to that script Silence that you wanted to make years ago?" He said, "Why don't we make that together?" And suddenly I was back producing. And then I did Wolf of Wall Street with Marty, and I did the last one was Irishman. So I did 3 of those movies, and Creed and Creed 2. So I was back doing production. Before I knew it, I was out of the directing business, back in the producing business.
Which do you prefer between the two?
I had a great time directing the last couple of movies. In fact, almost all of them, I really had a great time. Really, really great time. And I enjoyed it. But I also recognized that the work was very, very emotionally and physically hard. But I liked the control over it. But when I gave it up under the best circumstances, and that is working with Marty Scorsese.
Right.
And then I got a call from an agent back 5-6 years ago, and he said, "Look, I've got a client here who's got an idea for another Rocky." I said, "Listen, every guy has got another idea for another Rocky, and we end up getting sued half the time, so we're really not interested." And I said, "We did Rocky Balboa. We really did well with it, and I think we escaped with our lives. So let's kind of move on." He says, "You should really meet this kid." And I said, "No, I'm not interested." And I got to look at a movie called Fruitvale Station. And then I realized it was directed by the same guy who wanted to pitch the idea for me. So I called the agent back and I said, "Is that the same?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I'll meet him. I'm in New York. I'll meet him when I get back." He says, strange enough, he's in New York. So he set up a meeting for me to meet Ryan Coogler, who came to the Pier Hotel with his girlfriend, who is now his wife, Cindy. And he made the pitch on Creed. And I said to myself, if we're going to make another Rocky, let's find a generational, social, a different way to make it. We can't keep making the same movie. And this young man seems really bright. I thought he did a wonderful job with Fruitvale Station. And I said, okay, let's turn over the franchise to Ryan Coogler. And we could have done, and Bob was over 100% with it. Sly was too. And the only thing where I'm that came out good for Ryan, but good that he didn't listen to me, is at the end of Creed, when it was so well received, Ryan came to me and said, "I've got an offer to do Black Panther. What do you think?" I said, "Are you crazy? Why would you want to do a comic strip? Why would you want to do Black Panther?" I said, "You should do something very personal." Well, like a lot of people, he didn't listen to me and he did Black Panther, so there you are. But he's now one of the producers, by the way, on Creed 3 that we're preparing now, with Michael B. Jordan starring and directing.
Wow. It just keeps getting better, that one.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Wow. So let me ask you a question away from that. Why do you think movies matter to the public? And do you think how important is theatrical distribution?
Well, Hawk, back in the day of the Neanderthal, back in the day of the hunter, when man could just stand up, a man would go out all day with a spear or whatever method he had, and he'd go hunting for food for his companion, his wife, maybe his family. And at the end of the day, he probably came back and they would build a little fire and they would probably cook the meat or whatever he caught during the day. And they sat around that fire and they talk about how he was chasing the boar, how he saw a fish that he was able to catch. And he told the story. And I think in our DNA, somewhere in our DNA, there is that need to be together, to listen to a story, to see a play, to see a movie. And I think the theatrical experience is never going to stop. I think we're going through a period because of the pandemic where we're not allowed to be together, even if we want to. But that's going to change. And I know in my case, I can't wait to safely go to a theater to see a movie. And I think that's true of a lot of people. So I think it's just a matter of time. And I think in the interim, we're all enjoying the opportunity to see these films at home. But to me, I've had a projection room here for 40 years, and I don't think I've watched a movie in the last 10 years, because Margot and I like to pick up and go to Century City and watch a movie there and enjoy that experience.
Right?
What's that?
At the AMC in Century City.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
Yeah.
for shits and giggles, I'm on the board of AMC.
Oh, really? Okay, good plug.
Yeah, right.
Were you up on the stock that went up last week?
No, we're not allowed to sell. I wasn't up on it, but
But
no, but it's
that's what we like to do. We get a bite to eat in one of the many restaurants in the Westfield, and we watch a movie. But I think that experience is always going to be there. But we're going to just have to be patient for a couple of years until everything calms down. Maybe another year. People will be vaccinated. They'll feel secure. Maybe they're going to have to work out so that a film will open in 4 screens and do 25% capacity, but the total number of seats will be the same
right.
in some way. But I think people are dying to look. We know that when a restaurant opens for outdoor dining, go look on Cannon Drive, and you could see they're flocking to the restaurant. Right. People want to do it. And I think the theatrical experience is going to be back stronger than ever.
Right. Good. I like your answers. So tell me before my last question, and then we're going to go to Jennifer, who I think has a couple of questions or comments. Not many people have been lucky enough to work on, I don't know, 5 or 6 movies with Marty Scorsese. Have you seen was he always as talented as what we saw in Mean Streets? And was there a learning process? And what he did with The Irishman, is there a difference? Do you think he could have made The Irishman or Wolf of Wall Street when he was making Mean Streets? Or has he just always or is the experience of everything he's done brought him to be able to do, you know what I'm trying to say? Where I'm trying to
go?
I
look, we've made kind of, we will go back to 1976 together when he made New York, New York, and we made Raging Bull, we made Goodfellas together. He worked for me as an actor in Guilty by Suspicion. He worked for me as an actor in Round Midnight. And then obviously we did The Silence together. We did Irishman. Marty, if you look at New York, New York, you find an incredible talent there. A man that always took risks, always tries things, always not afraid to do things. And that's the guy I met. I developed that script, and when I developed the script, I realized that it was a very soft story. How do I make it tougher? I met Marty Scorsese, and it became a lot tougher. Every movie we've made together, I find a different set of, how shall I say it, a different set of brilliance. New York, New York, I mean, it's a musical that probably one of the most famous songs ever in movie history. By the way, it was never nominated for Best Song, by the way.
Unbelievable.
New York, New York, never nominated.
Unbelievable.
So by the way, they once did a thing at the Academy Awards, which was all the music, all the songs that weren't ever nominated, by the way. They should repeat that sometime. There were some pretty good ones. Anyhow, and then Raging Bull, Black and White. By the way, one of the people that influenced us to go for Black and White was Gene Kirkwood. Gene Kirkwood again said, you guys should make this in black and white. Yeah, that's okay, Gene. He's
got a lot of great ideas.
Oh yeah. So that was one movie. The next one we made together with Goodfellas, another great movie, but very different from New York, New York, or from Raging Bull as far as attitude is concerned and what it's. Wolf of Wall Street is certainly very, very different from anything else he's done. Silence is very serious, very, very much about religion and where you stand in religion. And I think with The Irishman, what that examines in all of us is where we are later in life. It's a reflective movie. And I think that's different from all the others in what it says about Marty, what it says about Bob. I think what it says about all of us as we get older and look back on it.
Well, our head of entertainment and the head of Channel 22, Jen Clymer, who you met quickly at the beginning, has a couple of questions before we sign off. And there she is. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi, how you doing?
We were talking about The Irishman, and I know you've got a question about The Irishman.
Yeah, I'm wondering, this incredible career that you've had, the technology in terms of how you can tell story has changed so much. Do you think something like The Irishman, where you're using the de-aging technology, is that something that's just like another tool in the toolbox, or do you feel like this has really transformed filmmaking and storytelling?
Well, when we made The Right Stuff back, 35, 40 years ago, we didn't have all the money we would like for visual effects. So we had a scene where Chuck Yeager's plane has to go in a really, really, really a deep climb. And we couldn't figure out how to do it. And then our special effects guy said, look, I got an idea. I'll build a model of the plane. What we'll do is I'll stand on the top of a roof on a high-rise building in San Francisco, and I'll throw the plane into the sky, and it'll fall. And we did that. And you know how what we did with it? We reversed the film. So you saw the plane climbing high. That's a visual effects. Just somebody very bright and doing something. Is it that imaginative? I think it is to only limited extent. I think it's all about making a script emotional and making a story emotional. I dare say that Bob De Niro on Raging Bull changed his physical appearance without any visual effects more than what we did, excuse me, with the visual effects on The Irishman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to ask her favorite films, Jen? Do you want to?
Yes. So we've been doing this live interactive broadcasting for the residents since the pandemic. It's a lifeline for information, for entertainment, and it continues to be the creative platform that it has always been intended to be. Mel Shavelson is the person who said 20 plus years ago, the residents need to have their creative voice heard and honored. And that's what MPTF Studios has always been about. So when the pandemic struck, we shifted gears and made sure that everyone still understood their creative voice had even more importance now that they were going to be physically distanced from each other. So since the beginning of this, we've been asking people who've joined us on our program, what is your favorite movie? And we've added, because it's Motion Picture and Television Fund, what is your favorite television show? And for 2021, we're adding, what's your favorite genre and or director? So that's our three big final questions. I'm going to wager Pretend It's a City is high on your favorite TV shows list. I don't know.
Now, do you want one movie that's my favorite? It's hard.
I know, and you can change your mind about it tomorrow, but like today.
Well, right now, The Third Man is my favorite movie of all time.
Wow.
Bergman's The Magic Flute is a great, Ingmar Bergman directed The Magic Flute, the Mozart opera. Great, great movie. It's not the greatest movie, but the last 20 minutes of An American in Paris is probably as great a movie making as you've ever seen. I could go on, by the way. That's just a little of it.
And to
By the way,
Hawk's point,
She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. John Ford's movie is about aging. That is a great, great movie.
all right. I was going to say to Hawk's point earlier about theatrical.
By the way, I must say 8.5 also.
Okay.
Now I'll stop, or else I'll never stop. I'll stop it now.
Hawk, we certainly can have you back, and you can give us your top 100 if you would like.
I'd love to.
Right, Hawk? We've done it before.
Sure.
I'd
Sure.
love to.
We did it with Billy Ray. Billy Ray's favorite 100.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
I've got
Irwin,
a
I'll bet you do. Irwin, I can't thank you enough. This has been absolutely a huge pleasure for me, and I know for everybody that's listening. And I just, again, on behalf of the Motion Picture and Television Fund and all of our residents and Facebook friends, you've just been, it's just been great. I think a lot of people learned stuff and had a lot of fun. So I'm honored, and thank you so much for being here with us.
And thank you for having me. It was really a lot of fun, and it's always great to spend an hour and a half with you, and all the folks down there at the home. And I admire so much what you put into all this. Thank you.
Right, got it. Maybe someday, 6 months from now, we can have a little bit of whitefish in Hillcrest.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everybody.